The ceremony no one will forget. Graduations are supposed to be joyous, a celebration of dreams realized and futures born. For Master Gunnery Sergeant Camille Jackson, it was also a silent tribute to survival, to years of sacrifice, and to a daughter raised between deployments and folded flags. She arrived not to be seen, but to witness. Clad in her full Marine dress blues, she intended to quietly watch her daughter cross the stage and step into her future. But life, as war once taught her, doesn't always follow a script. What began as a day of honor would spiral into confrontation. What should have been a moment of pride would nearly be robbed by prejudice. But in the end, a truth would rise, the kind forged in discipline, sacrifice, and service, and it would echo so loudly that even silence couldn't ignore it. This is the story of a Marine, a mother, and a moment that brought a room and a nation to its feet. And it ends exactly where it began, with Camille Jackson in uniform, standing proud in the back row, never asking for recognition but commanding it with her presence alone. A Marine mother's silent pride. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of the university's grand auditorium, casting soft multicolored beams on the polished wooden floor. Among the sea of proud parents filing into their seats, one woman stood out, not because of her skin or her posture, but because of the story she wore on her shoulders. Master Gunnery Sergeant Camille Jackson didn't just wear her Marine dress blues, she embodied them. Medals gleamed on her chest, symbols of sacrifice, courage, and 22 years of service that spanned continents and conflicts. She sat near the back, away from the attention, straight, backed and composed, scanning the program with military precision. Today wasn't about her. It was about her daughter Amira, the first Jackson to graduate from college. Camille had faced war zones, led units, and buried comrades. But nothing made her heart swell more than watching her daughter prepare to step into her future. She didn't speak much. She didn't need to. Her presence said it all. The unjust request, it started with a tap on her shoulder, soft but firm. Camille turned, expecting a fellow parent, perhaps even a student. Instead, she was met by two campus security guards, their expressions unreadable and official. One leaned slightly forward and spoke in a low, rehearsed tone. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave." Camille blinked. "Excuse me, there's been a complaint." The second guard added, "Some attendees feel uneasy." Camille's brows furrowed. "About what?" "Your uniform. It's intimidating to some guests." For a moment the decorated Marine was speechless. She had stood at attention before generals, negotiated tense checkpoints overseas, and given eulogies for fallen brothers in arms, but never had she been asked to leave a public event for wearing the very uniform that symbolized freedom. Her daughter was about to walk the stage, and now, because of misplaced discomfort or veiled prejudice, she was being told to leave. The injustice hung in the air, bitter and sharp, and the room, it began to murmur. Suspicion and silence were crawling in. Uncomfortable truths, the word echoed in Camille's ears, uncomfortable. Of all the battles she had fought, this was the most absurd, standing in her own country, in a room meant for celebration, and being deemed a threat because of her uniform. The uniform that didn't just represent her, it represented every man and woman who had ever laid their life on the line for this very freedom. She scanned the faces around her. Some looked away in awkward silence. Others whispered behind cupped hands. One woman clutched her handbag closer, as if Camille's medals might explode. The guard stood stiffly, trying to remain polite, but the message was clear. Her presence as a black Marine was somehow too much for this audience. Camille clenched her jaw. She'd worn this uniform in Fallujah, in Kandahar, in Somalia, but never had she imagined she'd be shamed for wearing it at her daughter's graduation, on home soil, among civilians who enjoyed the liberties she helped protect. Standing ground with grace, Camille rose from her seat, not to leave but to stand taller. Her heels clicked lightly against the tile as she faced the guards. The ribbons on her chest caught the light. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't plead, she simply said, "I earned this right." Her voice was calm, firm, commanding the way a leader's should be. "You're asking a Marine to leave her daughter's graduation because someone doesn't like how freedom looks in fabric and medals?" she asked, her tone laced with disbelief. The taller guard shifted uncomfortably. "We don't want a scene, ma'am. You made one the moment you approached me," she replied. For a heartbeat, everything stood still. The audience leaned in, sensing the tension. Camille didn't shout. She didn't cry. She stood in the quiet power of dignity, a woman who had faced gunfire and grief, now standing against ignorance in its cleanest disguise. What the guards didn't realize was this: Camille Jackson didn't back down. She stood ground even when no one else would. When the SEALs arrived, just as the silence turned heavy and awkward, footsteps echoed from the far end of the auditorium. Not loud, but purposeful. 6 men strode forward from the side entrance. Civilian clothes, but military in every movement. They didn't speak. They didn't hesitate. Their presence sliced through the room like a blade through fog. Heads turned. Students paused mid-whisper. A few gasps escaped from nearby rows. These men weren't average guests. There was something different about them. Their build, their alertness, their quiet intensity. The guards turned as the group closed in. One of the SEALs, taller than the rest with a scar down his jawline, stepped beside Camille and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Then he looked the guards dead in the eye and said, "She's not going anywhere." His voice wasn't loud, but it stopped the world. The security team instinctively took a step back. These weren't just any men, these were warriors, and though they were out of uniform, they carried authority like armor. A ghost from Kandahar. Camille's breath caught in her chest. She turned to look at the man beside her. There was something hauntingly familiar in his eyes. "We served with your husband in Kandahar," he said quietly. "He saved my life more than once." Camille's throat tightened. Her husband, Damon, had been killed in an ambush during his final tour. A Marine like her, his sacrifice had earned him posthumous honors. But hearing his name spoken aloud in this moment struck something raw and deep. The SEAL continued, his voice respectful. "We promised we'd be there for his family always. We saw Amira's name on the grad list. We didn't just come for her, we came for you." Camille blinked hard, willing back tears. These men weren't just showing up. They were standing guard for her, for Damon, and for everything their service meant. To the audience, it looked like a confrontation. But to Camille, it felt like reinforcements, and for the first time that day, she no longer felt alone. A salute to honor the tall SEAL stepped forward, scanning the silent auditorium. His voice rang out, not with anger, but with unmistakable command. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "before this ceremony continues, I ask for a moment of silence. For Gunnery Sergeant Damon Jackson, who gave his life in Kandahar protecting his brothers, and for his wife, Master Gunnery Sergeant Camille Jackson, who served this country with valor, and now stands here to watch her daughter graduate." Gasps fluttered across the room. The name hit like lightning. All at once, the energy shifted. Shame crawled across the faces of those who had judged her. Tears welled up in the eyes of nearby parents. A few students stood, then more. The entire auditorium rose, shoulder to shoulder. There were no orders, no directions, just one undeniable truth. This woman deserved respect. Camille didn't move. She stood tall, though her throat clenched. In that sacred silence, her husband was remembered, her service was honored, and ignorance had just been defeated by truth. A daughter's salute when Amira's name was called. The cheers were thunderous. She walked across the stage with confident steps, but not because she was receiving a degree. It was because her mother stood below her, surrounded by quiet warriors, bathed in a standing ovation. Amira accepted her diploma, posed for the photo, then turned, not to the crowd, but to her mother. With slow, steady precision, she brought her right hand up in a sharp salute. The room held its breath. Camille, eyes glistening, returned the salute from her heart. No words. Just a silent exchange between mother and daughter, Marine and future, 2 generations bound by sacrifice, discipline, and love. It wasn't a salute for the camera, it was for legacy. In that moment, Amira honored not just the mother who raised her, but the Marine who stood against injustice, and the father whose presence still echoed through that hall. The entire room erupted, this time not just for a diploma, but for a family that had reminded them what courage truly looks like. Room transformed, the clapping didn't stop, it grew louder, stronger, wave after wave rolling through the auditorium. Parents who'd once stared now stood tall, clapping with open admiration. Professors who had remained seated during other announcements now wiped away tears. Even the university dean stood with his hand over his heart, recognizing the moment's gravity. Camille stood frozen, humbled by the unexpected tribute, but what struck her most wasn't the applause, it was the change. Moments ago, she had been viewed as a disruption. Now she was being seen as what she always was, a symbol of honor, strength, and sacrifice. And it wasn't just about her. It was about every soldier ever judged by appearance before their story was known. It was about her daughter, who would never forget that her mother stood proud, not just in uniform, but in the face of prejudice. The crowd's silence had turned into thunder, and with it came redemption, not for Camille, but for the values she'd defended all her life. A legacy that echoed that evening as the sun set behind the campus bell tower. Camille and Amira stood outside the auditorium, surrounded by the 6 SEALs, still quietly standing guard. The air was softer now, filled with lingering warmth from a moment the nation would soon hear about. Camille wasn't seeking attention, she never had, but a video clip had already hit social media. A shaky phone recording of the confrontation, the salute, the ovation. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. One post summed it up best. They tried to remove a Marine from her daughter's graduation. Instead, she reminded us what America should be. Camille smiled as Amira leaned into her shoulder. They didn't need to speak. They had done what needed to be done. Camille hadn't just attended her daughter's graduation. She had etched a legacy into its memory, one that whispered into every heart that witnessed it. Courage wears many uniforms, and sometimes it stands quietly until the world is ready to listen. More than a moment, a message as the crowd dispersed, and the echoes of applause faded into the dusk. Something far greater lingered in that auditorium, not just admiration, but awakening. Camille Jackson hadn't come to teach a lesson, but she left behind one anyway, in silence, in steel, and in salute. She didn't protest. She didn't preach. She simply stood her ground and reminded everyone watching that true honor doesn't demand permission. Amira's diploma now hangs beside a shadow box containing her father's folded flag, but the story of her graduation will forever hang in the hearts of those who witnessed it. Not just a ceremony, not just a scandal, but a course correction, because sometimes it only takes one woman in uniform backed by quiet giants to transform a room full of discomfort into a hall of respect. Camille didn't just attend her daughter's graduation. She graduated all of us into a deeper understanding of dignity, courage, and what it means to truly stand tall.